Welcome everyone. Today we are talking a little bit about economic revitalization in Fairfield, and we have a group of 4 citizens that are pretty active in the community, and I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of go down the line and introduce ourselves and perhaps what our involvement in the community is and how that relates to economic growth and revitalization in Fairfield, and then we'll start talking about the issues. So Dave Reef, why don't you introduce yourself?
Myron, I'm Dave Reef with the, I've chair of the Economic Development Group here in town known as FEDA, and have done that for the last several years. Also have a grain and feed and fertilizer operation on the north edge of town. And but back to the reason here today, I think we're trying to come up with some things that Fairfield needs to look at this point as to our continued growth and revitalization.
Dave Eastburn.
Hi, I'm Dave Eastburn. I'm with Iowa State Bank and Trust Company. I'm also on the Jefferson County Civic Center Board. And the reason why I'm here, I'm representing the Civic Center Board and sort of explain how that fits into Fairfield's revitalization effort and its downtown revitalization effort, which is one of the reasons I got involved. The main reason I got involved with the board is the ability of this to be an anchor for revitalizing our downtown area.
Okay. And our mayor, Ed Malloy.
Thanks, Myron. It's a pleasure to be here today with everyone and to have this discussion, because this is an exciting discussion about our downtown revitalization. It's also an important discussion. I know that I learned last year in the campaign how dear our downtown square is to everyone. It's the place where we really come and commonly understand what connects us all as a community, and it's an important identity for the whole town. So we have some exciting things that are underway now in the way of planning. So I think it's a good time to maybe start talking about some of those efforts and where we see them going.
Thank you, Ed. And I'm Myron Gukin, a member of the City Council, attorney here in town, and very interested in revitalizing our downtown and the economy of Fairfield. And I think sort of the way we're going to do this will be a free-for-all conversation between all of us in terms of what's happening in the community, the exciting things that are happening, and hopefully what's going to be bubbling to the surface here in the near future. So with that being done, our introductions completed, let's talk for a minute about, you know, we throw around the words revitalization and economic development and growth a lot. What do you think that means in Fairfield?
Well, I think from an economic perspective or a banking or finance perspective, I think the main thing is that every community, when you first look at a community and analyze it, that community's got to be a net capital gainer. In other words, money has to be flowing into the community more than is flowing out. And we have to maintain that, and we have to continually do things that aid that effort. And then from there we can parcel up how that gets invested in the investment opportunities. But first and foremost, that capital is the engine that drives the train, and Fairfield has been very successful in drawing capital, and we want to make sure we continue to do that. And so these efforts fit into those things. We have to have people and capital that are coming to our community and staying here, or spending their money here, or investing here.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of that relates to tourism, bringing people to Fairfield to enjoy Fairfield and what it has to offer, even though they may not choose to live here, but also definitely getting people to locate here, to stay here, the people that are here to stay here, but to bring other people to Fairfield and to make it their home, and to build homes here and to buy from local merchants. So there definitely is more than one way to look at that. We'd like to have people come and visit us and support our local economy as well as live here too.
You know, Myron, one of the things that I find myself doing whenever I go into a new town or city that I've never been in before is I'll drive around the square just to see what's there. And it'll give me an impression right away of how lively a city it is, and I'm looking for that. I want to know how much life there is in this area, and it's something that I'll base on what I see. A lot of it will be what kinds of stores, and I think immediately I'll compare it back to Fairfield and see, you know, are we maybe ahead of the game in terms of, you know, what we're allowed to, or what we've been able to sort of keep anchored on the town square and what we haven't, and how we're comparing with other communities. But I think it's very important. It's that impression, that very first impression that you really get. And obviously we all know the communities that do a very, very good job of that. One of the things that they do a good job of is not only having keeping a vital economy in the downtown, but they also pull it together with some sort of unifying theme. Pella being the obvious example and probably the closest example to us, but I think we all admire what they've done and what they do, and I think in our own way, I think that a lot of people in Fairfield would like to see Fairfield find its common theme and its common identity, maybe to pull together some of those good characteristics we have downtown in our historical buildings. But it is something that I know that I look for, and I think that first impression is important when people come to visit a community.
And I think it's also important just to bring the community together. It used to be, and I hate to talk about history, but it used to be when, you know, you had 3 men's stores downtown and J.C. Penney's and all of the different kinds of retail merchants. It was a drawing card, and it wasn't necessarily because there was some central theme or whatever. It was just because that's where people came to shop. And on a Friday night, I mean, you could go downtown and just sit there and spend the time being entertained by watching people, because the square was full of people. There were lots of things going on. All the stores were open until 9 o'clock. We're just in a different economy now.
And you're not going to get, we can't kid ourselves anymore.
Right.
We're not going to get the anchor type of stores that I remember and you remember when we were younger in those Friday night areas,
Right.
the J.C. Penney's, the Harrisons. We're not going to get those anchor kind of stores anymore because they're just not going to locate. It's too small. There's not enough traffic no matter what. So we have to develop some kind of anchor type of activities that will draw people to that area. Now the stores you get may be different than what we remember. The hours might be different, but it still is an activity that will draw capital to our community, and also add to people staying here. You know, when you're looking at locating a business, you know, financing is a big part of it, feed is a big part of it, but also the amenities that keep you in town are important. And so we're all looking for those kind of things. And that's where I think the Civic Center fits into that, is one of those anchors for a revitalization effort of the downtown. And the Civic Center is more than just a theater. It is part of this economic revitalization activity that we want Fairfield to be a part of. And it's more than a theater. It's 12,000 square feet of exhibit space. There's a lot of activities that go on in Southeast Iowa. There's no reason, you know, Cattlemen's Association has their big review in Ottumwa. Why does Ottumwa have that? Why can't we have that? We can compete for those kind of things. And so that's why I'm on the Civic Center board, and I think the Civic Center is so important as one of those anchors for our downtown that we need.
And as I understand it, Dave, and I know this whole Civic Center concept has been talked about and thought about for years, and it's now just kind of coming to fruition with the Civic Center board. But as I understand it, initially, we're actually looking at a potential location out east of town, and then there was sort of the idea floated and some momentum about, well, maybe we can actually put it in the downtown area. Can you talk a little bit about that? And as I understand it, maybe some of the excitement that came from that.
I think initially the thought was a lot of the towns that were looked at originally, Washington, those kind of places, have it located on the edge of town, which are good locations. But I felt strongly that if we are going to revitalize our downtown, which we all agree needs to be done, as Ed says, you know, that impression, that economic activity, the sales tax that we become dependent upon, those revenue streams needs to be maintained, and that's part of the downtown. I really felt that it needed to be an anchor, and I thought that it could draw, people could get behind it and support it as an economic revitalization activity, not just a theater for a certain segment of our community. This really touches a vast amount of our community, and as Ed said, it's also one of those points where a point of commonality that we should support with. We all talk about the various factions in our community or whatever. Well, we have points that we all have common interests in, and we need to support those areas. You know, we have the rec center, we have little leagues, we have all those things where we all come together. This is one of those points that, and I'm real, that's another reason I'm involved in that, and why we wanted to bring it downtown, because then we could really say that this is not just a theater, it's just not for a small group of people, but it is part of that anchor for drawing capital to our community and revitalizing our downtown.
And I think the Civic Center is, for me anyway, is one of the most exciting things that we have before us in terms of revitalizing our downtown area. But there are other things going on.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I'd like, Ed, if you could address the Iowa Architectural Foundation's design program that Fairfield's been fortunate to become a part of, and talk a little bit about that and how that dovetails nicely with where the Civic Center's at right now.
Sure. Well, this was a grant opportunity. There's a foundation called the Iowa Architects Association, and what they do is, I think, 1 or 2 communities a year, they will come in and they'll do a study, and they will either solve problems that you'd like to solve, whether it be traffic flow or orienting your square or your entrances to highways in different ways, or they'll just come in and help you pull together some unifying principles within your downtown. And what they do is they'll pull together a team of about a dozen different experts from around the state. They have a pool of people of about 50 or 60 architects, landscape architects, urban designers, people who are in the profession. And they will come for 48 hours and they'll do a real intensive. And they're going to go down and work in that area and get a lot of community input. And in 48 hours, they're going to come up with a presentation for the community in terms of a vision of what you could do in terms of design to accomplish some of those things. We had and Dave, you were part of that too, we had an initial meeting with the lead architects back in the spring. We had about an hour-and-a-half presentation, then we took them downtown, took them to the square, and it was interesting, their reaction to our square. They were just thrilled to see how much was going on in our square. I think we tend to overlook the fact that we're making a transition from what the square used to be, but it is still really quite vital in terms of economic activity. They were very excited about that. They saw a lot of possibilities. So they are going to be coming and joining us in 2.5 weeks. They'll be down here the weekend of November 25th, I believe.
I was thinking 20 through 22. Maybe.
20 through 22. I don't have the dates written down on my calendar, but it's, I think you are correct. It's a Thursday, and they'll be here through Saturday. So we're looking, I think there's a lot of possibility there. They're aware of the Civic Center as a potential project, and they're going to be looking particularly at that area of town as well. When you look at the courthouse positioned at the north end of the square and the proposed property for the Civic Center, and then all of that area as well being possibly suggested into how it can be redesigned and redeveloped. And there is a lot of private interest right now in purchasing properties in that area and redeveloping them should the Civic Center go through. And I think what we would see is probably more in the way of those kinds of businesses that would appeal to visitors. Art galleries and restaurants and antique stores and craft stores, things like that. And really, I think we look at that as a way to complementary support for a civic center. If we are going to make a commitment to drawing people to our community for the benefit of art performances or conferences that we're hosting, if we can also entertain them while they're here and get them to spend some of their dollars, it's significant. As you know, Dave, from the presentations in the Civic Center, a lot of that research has been done in terms of what one event will bring in dollars to our community, and it's really quite significant. So the Architectural Foundation will be a good start at giving us some direction on how we would redevelop in that area.
You know, it might be good, too, for us to kind of review, kind of globally here, what all is going on in Fairfield. A lot of times, you know, things are happening beneath the surface, and a lot of people in the community don't realize what really is kind of going on in terms of economic development ideas and projects. And so we've talked about the Civic Center, we've talked about the Architects Foundation and their project that will be coming up just literally within the next couple of weeks. Let's talk a little bit too about the Strategic Planning Commission. Ed, you were on the Governor's 2010 Planning Commission, and as a kind of a springboard have introduced a strategic planning committee in Fairfield through the University of Northern Iowa. Talk a little bit about that and where we're at in terms of the Strategic Planning Commission and how that relates to our economic revitalization.
Well, one of the the reason we embarked on a strategic plan in the first place was to take a look 10 years down the road and see what is it that we wanted to accomplish to position the community for the future. And there were so many good ideas and so many creative people and so many well-wishers within our community wanting to do so many different things. We thought this would be a great way to harness all of those good ideas and all of that talent to begin to sort of flesh out some of those objectives. And I think one of the things that we find is that there's a great pride in our community from every level, and that pride is people want to express that in a way of creating more events that we can all share, whether it's through the Civic Center or just in our downtown square, and those that could also be built into events that would attract people from outside the community. There will be also information that will come out of there in terms of economic development, how we can better present our community to potential businesses and employers, and also to just make it more attractive to people who are looking to come and do business in this community. Really, we're trying to involve the youth, the elderly. It's really going to be quite comprehensive, but I think it'll set a tone and set a direction for saying that we want to take this community to a very productive and exciting level in the next 10 years to inspire our young people to stay in the community. That was one of the things that came out very dramatically from the Governor's 2010 plan, was that we are losing population rapidly in the state. Young people in particular. We have the second oldest population in the United States. The first is Florida, so that's where people retire. We might as well be the oldest population. We have to be relevant to young people, and I think that if we're doing some progressive things in our community, young people will want to stay and raise their families here too, or come back.
Certainly, that long-term look is what we all need to do. I guess I'm thinking of what other big things are happening to town right now that you could say fit this revitalization category, not necessarily of downtown, but on a macro look. Fairfield's never been on a major 4-lane thoroughfare. That's a couple years away, but it'll be here before we know it. A lot of effects from it, but the other big thing, of course, we're expanding our airport. Those are key components to this long-term growth that is going to put us on a different plane. If I could take a minute and just explain, in the old days when economic development groups looked for business and industry we wanted to bring to town to retain those young people and provide the jobs, you would do the wining, dining type approach and hope that they like the look and the feel. And since Iowa's known for its good schools, we can't we're thankful for our good schools, but we don't stand out necessarily with very many things in particular. But I guess when you look at the checklist that search companies now use, they automatically line us out. Fairfield is not on a list unless they have the key components. And certainly the airport expansion, the 4-lane, things we've never had to offer, and this civic center, I'll throw that in there too, because sometimes it's the things that you don't have that keep you out of a certain loop. And so these are all components. I don't think there's any one answer when someone says, what's the key to Fairfield going on to the next level? As long as I've been in town or watched other towns, I just haven't seen an answer. I think all these components are the building blocks.
Good point, Dave. Very good point.
You know, that reminds me, I was reading, I think, an editorial in the Register, and I don't necessarily always agree with the Register's editorial stances, but I read an article, I think it might have even been in the most recent Sunday paper, where the basic statement was that, you know, Iowa as a whole, and I think the same thing applies to Fairfield, we have to be ready to start taking some risks, because we're a very risk-averse state, and I think community, and you know, expanding the airport, doing the civic center, maybe changing the look of the downtown area, or getting some unifying theme and trying to get property owners involved in that. That's all going to involve risk for everyone, private and public.
But there's a risk in not doing it.
Exactly.
I think that that's the major point that people have to understand, is that either way there's a risk. If you don't do something, you have the risk of capital draining out of your community, wasting away. We're in competition with other towns, other places in Iowa who offer good schools or whatever. We need the intermodal transportation, we need the amenities, we need those kind of things that we can sell. If we don't do these things, then there is a greater risk, and the greater risk is that we get older, we lose capital, and suddenly we have no chance for economic development, and we become a suburb, or we waste away. So I think there's in my opinion, yeah, some of these things have risk components to them, but the greater risk is not doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know, I think it's a very good point, and I think that really our community, we're pretty comfortable with risk. I think our community really has its foundations on people who've really taken risks, and it continues to go that way. And it was really a shame that we lost the Meritor plant this year. But when you look at the rest of the manufacturing community that we have here, these are businesses that were started in Fairfield. Yes. These are locally owned operations. We are, you know, I wouldn't say that we are at risk with a lot of those companies. They do a great job in their areas, and they're probably more subject to their own internal markets, external markets, rather than anything else. But that and the entrepreneurial businesses that we've developed in the last 20 years has put us really way ahead of where Iowa is in terms of taking those kinds of risks. So I think that's what makes me feel most comfortable within this city and this community, to take those kind of risks that are going to position us, as Dave described, with the infrastructure, and as Dave described here, with the amenities as well, because we've gotten a lot done in the last 10 or 15 years as a community, with a new library and our recreation facilities, parks, and with the trails that are being developed right now. A lot of that's been done with our own money, a lot of it's been done with our own sweat, and we'll continue to do it that way. And this the Civic Center is really going to be one of those projects that it's not necessarily the one that every community has to have, but for a visionary and community that's comfortable with risk the way that Fairfield is, I think we're one that really should have it, and can support it, because you know, we really do have the talent in the community to support it.
Well, I think the other thing that's important about the Civic Center is it really is, it's a private-public partnership. And I guess I think that's really the only way you can be successful anymore. The city could not take on a project of that magnitude, and probably wouldn't on its own take on a project of that magnitude. But here you've got a group of citizens that have come together and for years and years have been looking and researching and investigating, and have come up with this concept and this plan, and it's very well thought out, and are out raising money trying to create the funds to be able to make it a reality. And yes, they've come to city government for some help in that regard, but our help leverages additional money because of the CAT grant that's that are available and are being considered now. And I don't know, David, do you know anything more about the status of how that?
Well, I just received information today. We got favorably scored by the CAT board, which means that we now can go into the negotiation phase for actually getting the grant. And so the money that the county has put in and that the city is putting in, and that as we get ready to try to get some shorter-term bonds, that money is being leveraged with state funds, and we've got a significant amount of private donations. We still need to raise more. So it's come a long way in the last 2 days as far as the CAT board, and a lot of people have done a lot of work that have been in long term. Sally Neff, Tom Stanley, Kelsey Mullen, who's been working, but a lot of people have put in a lot of time and got to this point where it's very exciting. So we're well down the road to making this a reality, I think.
I wanted to mention also that the Vision Iowa program, one of the components that came out of the Iowa 2010 plan, and while we were discussing creating more destination attractions in Iowa, we really struggled with finding that one big attraction that would really be significant and different enough that would bring people from a 8 or 10 state area to Iowa, or possibly from around the country. It didn't appear realistic, and it appeared to be not probably the most frugal way to spend the monies that were being talked about allocating. The concept was that our communities are our gems, and that if we were to support those communities with special projects, the ones that could come up with the support from within to match those grants, so that would be the way that those monies would best be spent, because then Iowa could be marketed as a network of very interesting places to come. And if we continue to work with what we already have going in this region, being very close to Mount Pleasant in there, Threshers being very close to Van Buren County, and certainly to Pella, and Ottumwa, we can really develop a regional tourism influence that would make that Civic Center something very, very important for us.
Well, I think that's important, and you see that in your strategic plan too. There's no real coming up with that what I call the silver bullet project. How long did it take Old Threshers to get where it's at? I mean, how long did it take Tulip Time to get where it's at? I mean, this takes years, and we just are not going to be able to get that silver bullet thing. But it's better to have a continuous type of activities with the Civic Center, the downtown, those kind of things, instead of trying to find that one silver bullet project. And I think what I've read on the strategic plan, I've been able to take bootleg copies from Connie Boyer and read them. That does a very good job of doing that. And I think the same thing is with FIDA, is that instead of finding that silver bullet saleable thing, you have to find the components to sell, the transportation, the infrastructure, the financing type of packages that make it attractive to people to look at Fairfield first, and then once you get the opportunity, have the other things that you can sell them on. And so I think that's really good with Vision Iowa, the CAT board that we found, and then the strategic plan does a really nice job of doing those kind of things instead of trying to come up with the the grandiose big, you know, project to make it like Tulip Time, which is not going to happen.
And remind us, Dave, what's the approximate amount that we're looking at as possible CAT grant from the Iowa Vision?
Well, I'm not really sure, and I don't want to, you know, sway the negotiations, but you know, it'll be in the neighborhood between $800,000 and $1 million, and that we're going to be asking for a minimum of those type of things. But it's a negotiating process, and they will definitely look at how much public and private support is in the community and the sustainment of this thing. Of course, they're not. The state of Iowa does not want to put $800,000 to $1 million in a project that in 5 years is going to be a vacant lot. So they favorably scored it, and that means that they think that this is a sustainable project. And now we have to really reach, because they're looking at finite resources too. There's a lot of communities out there trying to get money. So it seems that we favorably competed, and we're in that position. So which is very exciting.
Mount Pleasant just received a $1 million allowance that was contingent on the success of their entire fundraising. And their project was also a $6 million project. That seems about the range, even though they said they've done as high as 20%, so it could be as high as 1.2.
Right, it could be in that neighborhood, but we of course we're going for whatever we can get, but that's generally what's going to happen.
Ed, talk a little bit about, in terms of talking about the downtown area and revitalizing it, which is certainly a big component of our community's revitalization and economic growth. We've got a Beautification Committee now.
Right.
And what's that Beautification Committee doing, and how does that relate to Pride in Fairfield and our downtown area?
Right. Well, the Beautification Committee, I can't say enough about them. They really wanted to sink their teeth into that project, and did so by having just a simple cleanup day, and it was really marvelous what was accomplished. And I think mostly what was accomplished was, again, a community pride and community spirit, because there were a lot of people down there working and cleaning the alleys and the streets and the sidewalks. And it gave the people that did that the ability to really look around and see what's possible. I think we're going to be coming up with some constructive suggestions about some of our alleys, and maybe making those also pedestrian malls the way we've done with our North Alley. There'll be some ideas there. I think people are looking at the backs of some of our buildings and saying that we can do some things there, maybe some nice art, some murals of some sort. But I think those are probably the short-term things that people will be looking at. I think long-term, we're going to take a look at, for instance, in 7 years when we have a bypass completed, 5 years when we have a bypass completed, it's going to completely change the character of Highway 34 as it exists now. The state will turn it over to the city at some point, and they, in the process of doing that, they will also make sort of one last dedication of resources, monies to doing something, whether it be resurfacing or redesigning an entrance or something. We're going to come up with a kind of a master plan look at that. We are thinking about possibly going to a 2-lane boulevard on the eastern portion, coming into the square, maybe with some bike lanes through the square, and then going out to the west of town where it opens up and the traffic would open up again as well, and maybe going 3 lanes there with a turning lane and bike lanes there. But in doing that, I think we'll have an opportunity to identify some areas where we'll have some projects for plantings or some design elements. I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to see. I think they're also just very interested in some of this architectural design in the downtown that we'll go through with the Architectural Foundation, and just really bringing out more of the historical value of our square and just the general beautification. And I think that's going to have an impact. One of the things that we're talking about while we're talking about the square as well, when we look at the square, I sort of did a little inventory of what's down there right now, and I was pretty amazed that we actually have 26 different categories of businesses down there, from office supply store, bakery, banks, herbal stores, bookstores, music stores, certainly restaurants, many businesses. But it's really there's some things there, some very unique gift stores, some things there to build on. I think some things for us to really look at and see if we can add some of those complementary businesses that would make the downtown someplace that we could enjoy more, and also people from outside Fairfield would enjoy a great deal as well. So I think we're really well positioned. I think we just really have to do a few things to pull them all together into one sort of a theme, and then market ourselves and promote ourselves.
We're talking about a lot of newer things and new ideas and things that are kind of on the horizon, which are very exciting. But something that we know we really owe a lot of thanks to are the existing businesses and industries which have really been the foundation of Fairfield and for economic growth and jobs in Fairfield for a long time. And Dave, maybe as president of FIDA, can you kind of give us a review of where we're at in terms of our some of our long-term businesses and some of the expansion that's going on? I know that there's continued to be some new expansion in the industrial park, and maybe even some sale of some lots and some new things happening out there, and kind of what FIDA's outlook for the future is too.
Well, we're trying to we're anxiously awaiting chances to work with the strategic plan that the city is involved in, and the architects, the foundations thing, because we don't want to charge ahead in any one direction. I think we're all excited that we've sold a lot of lots in the industrial park in the last 5 years, and it's kind of the mid-sized operation. We haven't hit the big strike, but of course there's risk with the big
Sure.
strike that it strikes out. So I guess we're pleased with the subtle growth. We know someone will occupy those vacant factories that a lot of people are concerned about. It may not look much like the ones that left, but whether it's a piecemeal approach or we just don't know. But we are, thankfully there is interest. Mm-hmm. Fairfield has as the Iowa boy reminded us, that very nice 75th chamber recognition last week that I know there'll be some reruns on. Please watch that and think about it, because some old line manufacturers, actually Tom Loudon gave just an outstanding rendition of why Fairfield was so important for the last 160 years or whatever we're up to. The foundations that are still there, not necessarily deep-rooted in still the foundries necessarily, because we get our jobs now from lots of different smaller entities, and I guess that's the other quality of life thing. Maybe we've said it without using that phrase, but a civic center certainly lets would-be employers rest assured that they'll have job retention. The day is gone where you can say, I'm going to move my plant out to Timbuktu, and my employees better like it, because they'll leave. Mm-hmm. They're looking for quality of life, and I really see this again as a key component of the kind of things we can draw into this town that make manufacturers and other employers want to be in Fairfield. It just all fits.
Mm-hmm. A couple other things I'd just like to throw out to the group, just for any particular comment about, because I know there are things that are also happening in Fairfield concerning revitalization, economic growth. The Chamber of Commerce, a couple of years ago, with the cooperation of local banks, and Dave, you may be a good one to speak to this, started a low-interest revitalization loan fund for helping revitalize the downtown area. And I know, being on that board and reviewing those applications, there has been considerable interest in that. You have any comments about that, Dave?
We have financed several businesses in that area that not only takes in the square but just off the square in a fund, and all the financial institutions have been involved in that. And I know that other institutions have funded those loans, but we have. It's a really good example of a local initiative to get to start people who may not have quite the capital to start in, but start them off the ground to those businesses that have the opportunity to do it. And I think it's a very exciting local partnership. Instead of sitting around waiting for something to happen to us, doing those things that we can do for ourselves, and and there's other opportunities. There's SBA type of loans and those things, but this is fairly fast. It can get money, get capital out on the street and investment opportunity fairly rapidly, and so I know that we're excited about participating in it, and I'm sure the other institutions are too. But that is available. That is out there if businesses are looking at capital for locating on the square or just off the square, and we'd be certainly happy to talk to those businesses, as well as it's available at all the financial institutions in Fairfield. So.
And for those of you that may not be familiar with the program, basically it's a low interest type of loan. I think up to a maximum of $50,000, if I remember correctly. And basically for the purpose of trying to increase their business or their presence in the downtown area.
Right.
And I think that's just been a great local thing to have happen between our chamber and our local banks, to say, yes, we believe in our downtown area enough that we're willing to give low interest loans to support that type.
But those kind of things, as I go back to my original comment, those kind of things can't happen unless Fairfield is gaining capital. Because that money that's available, that we invest back out, that the institutions invest back out, has to come from outside or within our community. So Fairfield has to be gaining capital to do those kind of local initiatives. Otherwise, if you don't do anything to draw that capital in and have more staying here and drawing in than it is leaving, those kind of initiatives aren't possible. And that's what we're all about in all these things, is first and foremost, and all the financial institutions are very interested in doing things because and then after the capital gets here, we'll fight over, we'll be happy to fight over for the business, but what we don't want to be doing is being in business in a consolidating or contracting environment, because that's when it really does get tough.
Dave?
Another program we might mention, there's an item called a Reddy Loan that Fairfield was never, until this past year, eligible for, because we had a certain level of economic engine running. But due to a combination of a couple of things, the factories declining, we are now eligible for some state, a DED program that allows a business perhaps to expand that it maybe is on the edge of the bank criteria, and this has been utilized by, I believe, 6 firms so far. So there are several avenues that help, that people can come to for help if they're so inclined.
I think that's a good point. I was going to ask Dave to mention that Reddy Loan program, because that, as soon as it became available, there were a number of companies that were, good companies with, I think, a good established business that took advantage of that. And again, that shows that spirit of growth and a little bit of risk that people are taking to grow their businesses. We also are very fortunate. We have a very active, personal, or what's called an angel investing network within Fairfield as well. There are a number of people who've partnered together to buy into local businesses, certainly starting new businesses. That's something that's still active and ongoing. And those are the things you don't necessarily read in the headlines in the newspaper or see every day on the street. But there are people who are, continually venturing out and growing new businesses. So we're very fortunate to be in that kind of a dynamic environment, and those are the things that really make all of this possible for us.
Mm-hmm. One final thing I guess I just want to throw out, and as another thing that's happening that anyway I'm excited about, and I think could really be a catalyst for bringing people to Fairfield and ties into the whole development and revitalization scheme, is the trails that are being developed around Fairfield, and what the Jefferson County Trails Committee has done. Just last Friday, Dennis Lewiston from the County Conservation Board spoke to Rotary Club that I'm a member of, and talked about what was happening and kind of brought us up to speed on the trail system. I think that's going to be an incredible asset for Fairfield as that gets developed, and
It already is.
It is, and will completely be, as I understand it, pretty much finished with 17 miles of loop trail, or maybe it's 27.
20.
It's 27, or not 17, around Fairfield when the bypass gets completed and the DOT does their part of it.
Yeah, I've run on those trails, and actually, if you have never been on them, they're really nice places, and I know that there are groups that are looking at once it's finished, having a Fairfield marathon. You could run a marathon on them. You could, bike Fairfield, add those things, and it's just another one of those things. Instead of finding that silver bullet, one shot, one deal thing, it's a continuous thing, but it's the people that put that together are true visionaries, and it should be. It's wonderful, and it's going to be it already is, but it's going to be a real attraction.
I think so too. There are just so many things that are happening right now that I think are very exciting for Fairfield, and they've kind of been bubbling below the surface, and I think we're getting very close to that point where a lot of things are going to start to coalesce with our strategic planning committee and the plan that's going to be coming out of there in the next month or so. The architectural foundation, and they're meeting with us in the next few weeks. The bypass as it develops, the civic center as it develops, and as we find out more about the state being willing to share in that. We've got a lot of good things happening in Fairfield. Any closing comments or anything from anybody?
I'm excited. I think that slowly this is coming to the type of community that people want to be part of. We see our kids. I've got kids that lived in Florida a couple years, and it wasn't near the attraction they thought it was. They're back in Iowa for schooling, which again is a strong point of Iowa. And I think the future for Fairfield looks very, very good. You can pine away at a few of the negatives that are kind of short-term problems, as long as we're willing to work together and find the solutions.
I think that my only final comment would be, once again, is we have to be willing to pull all these things together with the strategic plan, and pull all these events that are bubbling together and focus them and get them to fruition. Is we have to be willing to take some risk. I mean, it has to be prudent risk, and it has to. We're not out there gambling.
Right.
But I think people need to understand that the real risk is not doing these things. And if we do take these risks, we expand our airport. We have the 4-lane now. The Civic Center, a lot of the trails, the initiatives that Ed has taken upon himself in the strategic plan. I think that we will have a good opportunity to bring capital, keep capital here, and then once we do that, then that is the healthy economy that you have, and the healthy, people do come and go around our square and evaluate us on those drive-by things, and they will see, and then that just feeds upon itself. But we have to continue to be willing to take those risks to do that.
Well, I remain excited about Fairfield. I'm excited about what's developing right now, and I'm excited about what our potential is for the future. But I think what gives me great confidence that it's going to work is really evidenced by what we see together. We have government, our non-governmental organizations, our banks, our Chamber of Commerce, everyone and our citizens really united around these kinds of themes, and I think with that we'll succeed.
Dave Reef, Dave Eastburn, Ed Malloy, thank you very much
Thanks, Myron.
today,
Thank you,
gentlemen, for coming in and talking a little bit about economic growth and revitalization in Fairfield. I'm Myron Gookin. We thank you and hope this has given you a little bit more information on what's happening and what is going to be happening in Fairfield.